Great point there, because as you said, so the H1B, like every time it gets renewed, there's a period where it kind of restricts your travel before having that visa stamp. So you have to go to a consulate and get that renewed, and that can take some time because sometimes a lot of the consulates are like out of appointments. So that's one constraint which kind of like it reduces your flexibility. And the other important point is that if you lose your job on an H1B, you only have 60 days to figure out another job, and that's actually quite low, because if you've seen some of the tech layoffs that are going on, it doesn't even matter if you're necessarily a great performer, but if your company has like a bad quarter, a couple of bad quarters, they're gonna just lay off, let's say, an entire department that they don't think is profitable or something like that, and you can come under you can be in a situation where you have a 60-day period where you have to look for a job and the market just isn't good enough. So this kind of gives you that that safety net as well. So that was what I was considering because of the process, right? When you understand the process, you realize it's a multi-year kind of relationship, right? So there's the application, then after that there's like a removal of conditions and any RFEs, anything that comes in between, right? So you have to treat it as that. So you want to make sure that it's someone who has seen a lot of cases, has a lot of personal experience with this program, and they can guide you through the documentation and like fast and responsive, and their process itself is streamlined, right? So I would say that again, a multi-year relationship. So see if you can work with this person over the long term, right? And then check for the responsiveness, how quickly they're getting back to you, and just inquire more about what their volume is and like how many clients have they served in the past year. Those would be three things to get started on. Sure. So what I found was anyone who visits EB5AN or has interacted with your team will be able to instantly tell like the amount of detail oriented like documentation, information on the YouTube channel, on the page, the responsiveness of the emails is really great. I did not see that kind of response. I mean, they were all responsive. When I'm talking about other regional centers, they were all responsive, but I never got that same amount of detail and responsiveness from any of them. In fact, even some of the prospectus documents which were sent seemed to be lacking a few details, and I had to kind of ask again for them. And in some cases, they weren't even available, and that's fine. But I think in some cases, they weren't even able to tell when they'd be able to get them. So I found that when I reached out, so even within EB5AN, there were a couple of projects I was looking at, and when I asked your team, I work with Jordan and Dyrang from your team, so they were very responsive. I always got like any question that I had, I was able to communicate through multiple channels like email or WhatsApp, and always get a reply back or always have a clarification answered. And in some cases, some of the questions that I asked never even got a reply from other regional centers. That was important to me, and I thought that was a big differentiator, really. And I think anyone looking to invest in this should also keep that as a very important criteria, right? To make sure that you're reviewing all the documents possible, and if you see anything missing in terms of financial documentation, make sure to ask the regional center. And as I said, right, some regional centers didn't have that documentation on hand, and they weren't able to provide it. So that was like a big differentiator, because EB5AN always got back to me with any of the documentation that I asked. And for people applying with this who are not of a financial who don't have a finance background, it's important that they go through these documents and try to understand like how a particular how the money will flow, right, from, let's say, the structures that are created, the GP LP structure. So it's important to understand that, and you will have questions if you don't have a finance background. You will have questions, and you need someone on hand from the regional center who will be able to answer your questions. So questions about that, questions about the capital stack, and yeah, that was a differentiator because a lot of folks weren't able to answer it in other regional centers.
One thing you mentioned there was rolling revenues. Why, like in your opinion, why was that a critical aspect that you wanted to find a project that had that?
Correct. So the reasoning behind this was that when you put in when you're putting in like this investment, right? You're after the period of the investment that it's at risk, you also want to kind of get your money back, right? So like the idea is that after a certain amount of period, there has to be some sort of like exit event, right? Which means your project is going to have to, if it's let's say a hotel, right? After completion, guests are going to start moving in. That's going to generate revenues, and you know, slowly the investor is kind of getting paid back, right? With rolling revenues, but that requires like an upfront. It has to like you need all the amount to construct the hotel and then kind of do that. But if you're developing in phases, you can put some money, and then when that house gets built, in the case of Rocky River, you can kind of fund the returns through sales of those homes. So you're kind of building up revenue after the first set of homes have been created. So even if it's like a 10-year project, you're already starting your revenue start rolling in every like from the 2-year mark and going forward, right? And you're seeing like that's not the case with some of the other projects. All right, so I think one of the first criteria I was looking at was who is the developer of the project, and what is the like the regional center, and who are the ones who are the major players of this particular project, right? What is their track record? That was important to me, right? Have they successfully executed such projects in the past, or is this like one of their first or second projects? So that was the experience or the tenure. That was one factor that was pretty important to me. The second was, and these are like these are not, I mean, there's no order of ranking here really, but the macros of the project, right? Like for example, let's say in a rural project, which is kind of the rural is coming from the census data, right? So I want to understand how far is it from like a major city, right? And like who are the people who are the target demographic that will kind of come there? Like, is it vacationers? Is it like older people? Is it children? That kind of stuff. So I was interested in veterans. You know, that who is this project serving? So that was another sub criteria, right, for the macros. And then what is the status of the project? Is it something that's almost complete? Is it something that's just starting? And I'll speak more to the state of the project later as well. Then the capital stack of that particular project, right? How is it funded and like financed? How is the construction done for that, right? And how are the revenues generated? That's another sub criteria, which is it on a rolling basis, or is it that the entire construction has to complete before even a single dollar can come in? So there were aspects of that. Was it leased by is there a government involved here? So there were some factors like that involved. And the third criteria was the EB-5 program requires that you create like 10 jobs over a period of 2 years, right? So I'd suggest that people read up on what are the types of jobs that need to be created. So please do your research there and try to understand the RIMS model and all that's involved there, especially for the rural stuff. And you'll see that the job creation is the important part, because you can get a conditional green card, but if the job creation isn't met, you will never be able to satisfy the removal of conditions. So that's a very important part of it. So you want to see if your project will be able to generate that generate those jobs, right? And another factor was the like which phase of the project it is, right? I think I talked about that, and the reason why I said was a project that's initial stages, that has just started and has received, let's say, the 956F approval, which Rocky River has. Chances are it's going to your job creation is going to be satisfied, because any construction job, especially initially, is going to be very intensive, right? So there's a lot of jobs getting created in like the initial period and future phases as well.